Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is your boy Mahmoud with a new episode with the world's news commentary. Today, we're starting with good old Europe. We are seeing that the EU is united against the US sanctions on Iran and is actually planning to use what is called the blocking statute, which is a wild card that the EU could use when it doesn't want to go along with sanctions imposed by foreign countries, such as the United States in this case. Okay, so that would be the legal pretext that they will be utilizing to not go ahead and comply with the request of the United States for countries to not deal with Iran. And if the US decides to sanction or to punish European companies, then that's something else that will be uncharted territory in that sense. While some EU countries are pulling out, others are moving in. So a UK oil company just moved in, while the giant French oil company Total has just pulled out. Italian and Dutch companies are pulling out as well, and they're just doing it because they're uncertain of what is going on. Alright, in one more Iranian move to counter the US sanctions on it, Iran will be holding negotiations with Russia-led trade bloc known as Eurasian Economic Union, the EEU, over a free trade zone. This will undermine the effects of the sanctions significantly and makes the US appear more and more as the odd one out on the international scene. So you got the EU saying no to the US sanctions, you got and willing to continue dealing with Iran, and then you got Russia and its friends also extending their hands over to Iran. You got China, you got Iraq being the playground of Iran, obviously. You got Syria. I mean, Iran's got a lot of friends. You gotta admit, Iran's got a lot of friends. Okay, in news related to Gaza, after, of course, what we saw last week with the Israeli snipers basically shooting or being filmed shooting unarmed civilians, while on the other hand, we also saw attempts to breach the fence that was caught on camera. A gas pipeline was bombed, detonated, explosive devices were planned. I mean, it wasn't all peaceful. I'm sorry. I mean, I know this will upset some people, but I myself did not want to comment on what is happening in full until until some time passed, because as time passes, more and more things would get revealed. Unfortunately, in this case, there wasn't anything that I could see beyond what was already happening, which is that Israel is using excessive force. There's a problem with the engagement rules of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and at the same time, there was nothing restrained about what was going on in these protests. These protests were intended to erupt clashes. I mean, there were people continuously asking the protesters to get closer to the fence, and I'm really trying to to grasp what does it mean. The people in Gaza are desperate. I understand the situation, the rough life there. 11 years of blockade, 11 years of having nothing. I mean, there's a report that says that about 50% of Gaza's children do not want to continue on living. I mean, it is heart-tearing. The words cannot describe the suffering of those 2 million people living on this small, tiny piece of land with no resources, no ability to do anything. So anyway, I understand that the frustration will lead them to basically burst out against the borders. And I still do not think that the Israeli response was justified, but I don't think that the Gazan response or the Gazan attempt to breach the fence was justified either. I mean, after you breach it, where are you gonna go? All you're gonna see on the other side is tons and tons of IDF assets. What are you gonna do with them? I mean, what are you gonna do with? Why are you taking your children with you in such dangerous area? The entire thing does not make sense. I understand the frustration, but it's more like a tragedy than anything else, really. It's just a huge tragedy, and it will continue. It's not gonna be the last. Anyway, so Egypt and Qatar, according to Israeli diplomatic sources, are working on a new deal that will attempt to solve the situation in Gaza. Egypt will promote peace between Hamas and Fatah, Hamas being the Palestinian faction that is leading the idea that violence is the only way against Israel, and Fatah is the faction leading the efforts or the position that peace is the only way against Israel. And that you obviously understand why they would be at odds, and they're always fighting. And I of course despise both of them. Both of them are opportunistic, and they're all they're doing is basically attempting to be relevant in one way or the other. They're controlling the political scene, and they are full of corruption, and I just hate both of them. Anyway, Qatar wants to have a neutral council of experts to manage the Gaza Strip. And imagine that this idea is generalized all over the world. No more politicians, just experts who manage countries. Damn, I love the idea. I'm like, damn, like, what do you need politicians for? Like, what is the job of a politician? I mean, you could literally have experts do this stuff, not politicians. But maybe I'm just naive. Maybe there is a certain reason for politicians. Please let me know if you think that there is a reason for a politician's job to exist versus an expert doing that job of managing stuff. Simple. But anyway, I mean, yeah, power and stuff. Power, basically it's power balance and whatnot. But really, a judge is an expert in law and he performs certain tasks. You know what I mean? Cool. You have the Congress. Why do you need the Congress? Congress itself is composed of various technical committees that put out recommendations for senators and whatnot. Imagine if decisions were made purely based on experts arguing and making conclusions based on their expert opinions. Anyway, maybe it's too idealistic, but just something to think about. So that's one thing that Qatar is proposing. The other thing is that they're saying they're going to try to ensure that Hamas doesn't get any offensive weapons anymore, which are basically the rockets that they get from Iran. And Qatar is of course involved in that. It is able to guarantee something like that because Qatar and Iran are best buds. Anyway, it would be awesome if it works out, and it would signal the extent of success that Israel had in crippling Hamas. Because Hamas, if they are not getting these offensive weapons, if they are having to come to make peace with the Fatah in a definitive way, it's not like it's the first time they do it or try to do it, but if they actually do it this time, it would show how desperate they are. Meanwhile, and they should be desperate, honestly. Like, why is Hamas not desperate while the Gazans are desperate? I mean, they better be desperate. Anyway, it would also show the true extent of influence that countries like Egypt and Qatar could exert on the Palestinian factions. I am just wondering if these guys just realized that Gaza is suffering, or were they waiting for a situation to arise in order to capitalize on the public relations and image shining purposes? Most likely it's the latter, to be honest. The last peace brokerage that Egypt was involved in was about 6-7 months ago, and the hopes were so high, and Egyptian officials were received in Gaza streets with celebrations, and no one heard about it since then again. Moving on, in Russia, Putin just received Assad, the president of Syria, where Putin announced that foreign troops are going to be withdrawn, meaning Russian troops are going to be withdrawn since the fight against terrorism is over, and that Syria now is ready for political process. Woohoo! Yay! Great news. I mean, it's been about 7 years late, but crushing the opposition takes time, right? Dictators, of course, would rather be time efficient about something like that, as they know that life is short. But I can tell you that he was trying his best. He just didn't have enough barrel bombs to do it all in a short period of time. But the moment has finally arrived, and they will rewrite the constitution, and they will hold elections. Oh my god, imagine if he did that 7 years ago, and instead of responding to protesters on the street with tanks and airstrikes. Okay? Anyway. And if you don't believe it, there are some YouTube videos that will show you what the Syrian regime did to the protesters when there was really no need for all of that. Anyway. The protests turned violent when the army started massacring people. That's it. In case you're thinking, no bro, you got it wrong. It was the CIA, it was the Western powers who planned all of this. Like, really? They also forced Bashar to use tanks against civilians? Come on. The guy literally used Air Force and tanks against civilians. Anyway. Couple of final things to say. Trump did not call the illegal immigrants animals. That's what the media reported at the beginning, and some of them apologized for putting it in such a dark, showing it from such a dark angle. He was actually referring with his comments to the MS-13 gang, which is a very powerful and scary gang in California. And that was the topic of the discussion when Trump made these comments. I don't agree with Trump, but the media bias is surreal. Moving on, North Koreans are threatening to back out of the negotiations because South Korea and the US are still having their military drills. And honestly, whatever, man. I'm not even gonna talk much about that because I know it will go back and forth for some time. So let it play out. Let's see where that takes us. Finally, in an interview that PBS News had with the Yemeni interior minister. Of course, there's a civil war going in Yemen. There's the Houthi rebels, and there's the Yemeni government that is backed up by the Saudi-led coalition. So the contention is that after the Houthi rebels are kicked out of a certain area, the Yemeni government is still not allowed to rule that area, which is super weird, right? So the PBS News reporter is asking the Yemeni interior minister, do you feel like the UAE is occupying Yemen? And the guy just laughed. The Yemeni interior minister just laughed, and he said, even I, as an interior minister, I'm not allowed to go to the seaports or the airports without the permission of the UAE, of the United Arab Emirates. And he said, yeah, if the situation keeps going on like this, and if we really feel like this is an occupation, I'm gonna hold a press conference and I'm gonna announce it. I'm scared for this guy because he's very courageous to say something like that. But yeah, this is coming from the Interior Ministry of Yemen, and of course they conducted interviews with some other local Yemenis, and they were all pretty frustrated with the Saudi-led coalition. They're saying that these guys, they came in as friends, and now they're acting like an occupation force. A lot of them actually put it that way. And so We keep bashing the US for going into countries and destabilizing them and acting like an occupation force, and our or the Muslims' justification for that is that they're the US, they're just, they go to Muslim countries and they do crazy stuff because they're fighting Islam, or because they don't want the Muslim countries to ever be strong again, or because they're looking for oil, or this and that, right? Okay, what about what the Saudi-led coalition is doing? A lot of it, the majority of the coalition is Arabic countries, and they're literally treating their Arab brothers, their Yemeni brothers, like they're subjects. And I don't even know what to say about that, but I'm interested in what you guys think. So leave a comment below about any of the things that I talked about. It would be really awesome to get a feedback and try to understand what people who listen to me think about these issues. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.